All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program, Johnny Cuba. European roots with that Caribbean soul, a refreshing German lager in a can. Official beer of the program, because if I'm recommending beer to you guys, I'm going to get the most delicious beer, all right? Go pick up a six-pack of Johnny Cuba, your local Sedanos, Presidente, Winn-Dixie, Fresco y Mas. Make sure you always drink responsibly. And, of course, don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. Joining us is our pal, Israel Gutierrez. We got to talk some NBA with him. In-season tournament. The final is tomorrow, Saturday night in Vegas. Semifinals were last night. Before we talk about the actual games from last night, did you give any thought to going? Like, was that in consideration? Do you want to be there at all?
Not really. I mean, I gave it some thought early on in the process, just not in the in this, once I knew who the teams were. It was like, oh no, it's not really something I would want to go to necessarily to like write off of or be there. Just watching it is good enough.
Oh, so if depending on like who made the Final Four, you may have went.
Yeah, I mean, like if the Heat had been involved, if it had been just some sort of mega star occasion, or if it was something where there was an obvious story I can go hit on, yeah, I would have. But
Israel, the Lakers were a 1.5 point favorite last night. Now, look, you can't expect them to win by 44. But was there a bigger lock than LeBron getting past the Pelicans to the first ever inaugural finals of the in-season tournament? They gave away free money last night, Israel.
I mean, yeah, if you were a gambler, and I, by the way, was at the Hard Rock yesterday for that first. Well, I was at the classic Seminole Hard Rock for the first roulette roll or first craps roll and roulette thing, and that was pretty cool. But the easier money was the Lakers there, and I think the table was set a while back when LeBron played on the road in Phoenix in an in-season tournament game, won the game, and in the post-game interview said, our first in-season tournament win, and he keeps hyping up the $500,000. And I think whether that was, league instituted that he did that, or if he's just doing it on his own, which I think he is, it really got the tournament going, and it really got the hype for the tournament going. And then you just throw in, hey, it happens to be really good regular season games that have this label on them. And you say, all right, it seems like they're playing for something greater. And so when you get to Vegas and the semifinals, the Final Four, or what have you, and it's, a short drive or a short flight rather from LA, and Vegas is full of LA fans. It just felt like it was going to be LeBron's moment. And in a one and done situation, a Final Four that he said he's never been in before, which is, pretty cool, pretty interesting. A Game 7 situation, win or go home. LeBron's pretty damn good in Game 7. So I would say, yeah, it was about as easy as a prediction as you could get.
So speaking of moments, I know like Stephen A. Smith was all over television yesterday, calling it the biggest moment of Zion's career so far. He hasn't played in any big playoff games. You remember a couple years ago where he's doing 360 windmill dunks in warmups of Game 6. They lose the game. He's like, I was going to surprise my teammates and play Game 7. All right. So last night, they lose by 44. And after the game, he says, he was disappointed in himself. He said, I came out too laid back. I wasn't aggressive enough. Israel, that's a terrible job out of Zion.
It's awful. It's awful. Like you're a younger core. You should, like, your first chance at this stage, and you're, going the too cool for school route. Like, I was bothered or kind of could predict that this was going to happen when him and Brandon Ingram got asked the question of how are you going to celebrate if you win? And they just looked at each other and cracked up. And it's just one of those situations where you see these players who are more caught up in their lives, in their, situations, and not really taking advantage of everything they can and being the best player that they can be. And, that's one of the things that we saw from LeBron from the jump. It was no wasted anything, no wasted seasons, no wasted, weeks, no wasted postseasons. Just take care of your body, make sure you're on the floor as much as possible, and try to win. And I think Zion he's just in a phase where he's got to fix everything about himself, whether it be the approach to basketball, whether it be on the floor. Like he even said yesterday, he's just been out there sort of hunting the best shot for himself, which in a way is what you want, because you want that guy who shoots 60% to find his shot, but you're also just trying to play ball and keep everybody else involved. And so when you hear him say these things, you realize that they've kind of been winning in spite of him, at least in terms of his basketball IQ and his dedication and everything else. And they're just a really talented team, and he's super talented. But it should be obvious who the younger, more athletic player is when you're out there with a guy who's been in the league 21 years. It should be obvious who wants it more when you've got a guy out there who's won 4 championships, and, you know, Anthony Davis, who's won a championship and isn't dealing with the same criticisms that you are. And it's not that you just come out and say that you're too laid back, but you lose by 44. Like, it's a terrible look when you're giving your first opportunity for a playoff situation, a playoff stage, if you will. And so I think it's terrible for him. I think that, you know, the idea that he could be traded this offseason was probably a little bit more real than people really think. It's just you were never going to get proper value back for him. So you just got to give it a go and see what happens. But, you know, I know his teammates aren't thrilled with him and everything that he brings to the table. So it's going to be quite the study, like the rest of this year and going forward with him, to see what kind of superstar we're talking about, what kind of dedication to this game we're talking about.
The Eastern Conference game, the Pacers managed to pull away. Tyrese Halliburton's been the star probably of the entire in-season tournament. Like, it's
maybe the whole season.
Yeah, it's been a star-making event for Tyrese Halliburton. But I want to start with the Bucks. And look, things can change. It's still the early part of the season, and Lillard just got there. But I look at this Bucks team. Should I be afraid of them? Because I'm not.
I mean, there's going to be games where they're just overwhelming offensively, and there's not really one of those, you know, not really much you can do about it. And I think the kind of the scariest part of that, when you think about it, is not when it's like a Giannis and Dame pick and roll. It's when you've game planned to stop all of that, and you've done it to perfection. And then their outlet is, oh, I'll just give the ball to Chris Middleton and he'll create something. And it's like, oh, crap, because that's a tough, you know, third option there. And so there's going to be nights where that's just going to be too much, and there's not really anything you can do about it, especially if, you know, Brook Lopez is taking and hitting threes. But I haven't seen anything out of them defensively that makes me think they've got stuff figured out. You know, obviously you're not going to game plan the same way in the regular season as you would in the postseason, so you're not going to have that same level of dedication. But when you've got somebody like Bobby Portis, this was real, right? Reported that he was sort of aggressively discussing things with his coach after the game.
Yeah, apparently there was something. I don't know that it was necessarily confrontational, but there was something between Adrian Griffin and Bobby Portis in the locker room.
And Bobby Portis is that type of personality, volatile. That could happen for him. But the fact that he has been, for lack of a better term, under wraps, that he has been, you know, good in Milwaukee so far goes to show you they've been good. But, you know, it's a little concerning when you see something like that with a rookie head coach. It was even a little different when it was like LeBron and Eric Spoelstra, because Spoelstra had been there 3 years and LeBron is who he is. But like Bobby Portis versus a rookie head coach, a champion, you know, contributor versus a rookie head coach, I don't know, you know, whose side most of the people are going to be on in that locker room. So I do think there's signs for concern. But in terms of like, should I be scared of them? Look, I said this going into the season, and, you know, I don't make bets or make anything stupid like that. But I said, you just look at the history of, you know, superstars getting together. You've never really seen it. Championship, first year, new head coach, all happen together. Like the Celtics was one thing, but they had that structure. They had Doc. They had all that stuff. This didn't feel like, especially when you're talking about two different philosophies of games, like Dame, offensive heavy, Giannis, you know, Mr. Do-It-All and defensively and in the paint and everything else. It's just, you have to take time to get those to meld. And if there's impatience along the way, then you're going to have stuff like this. But it's also funny that there's impatience after a 15-7 start. It didn't really seem to match up. So I'm going to like let that one go with Bobby Portis and say maybe it was more of a Bobby Portis thing. But I'm not super confident that this team's going to make it to the finals.
So the tournament has been a major success. Is there anything? It's certainly not going anywhere. Is there anything you would add to it or change moving forward?
I mean, there's probably a lot more that's going to come up when you think about it, but there's a couple of things that I think of. Number one is instead of point difference as the tiebreak, it should be points allowed, because it sets the tone of defense first. And when you talk about competition, you're talking about defense. And so I would say that's the case. So you don't have, people chucking up 3-pointers in a meaningless game and getting other people mad. Instead, you're talking from the very beginning, hey, this has to be a defensive effort type of game. And so I know that affects things with like pace, right? Like the Pacers are going to allow 130 points maybe and still win by 11. Hey, then just win. All right. Then if it comes down to point difference, then maybe you're going to have to, shut somebody down in that fourth game instead of the third game, instead of, being able to run up and down the court. So I think it's something to consider. The other thing about the tournament is it feels like there's something that can be done about those other regular season games that you then add to the teams that didn't make those final 8. Because like you got, somebody like I think it was Josh Hart complaining that the fact that they didn't make it to the quarterfinal or semifinals, they then now have like a couple of games against tougher teams that maybe they wouldn't have. I'm sorry, it's the other way around. It's because they made it. They had a couple of games that were tougher.
Right.
And so,
like for instance, for people listening who don't understand, like for instance, the Heat's 2 games that were added here are at Toronto and versus Cleveland tonight.
Right.
When because the Bucks advanced, let's say instead of the Heat, because remember they at that last game there that they beat.
They got the Knicks and the Pacers.
Right. Good point.
But, this happens a lot throughout the years, because there's some teams in your conference that you play 4 times and some that you play 3. So they just kind of left that wiggle room open. And so,
but it could have ended up being the same thing anyway.
It could have. Right. So I just think there's something that maybe could be done there that gives guys less excuses, the ones who the sore losers who don't make it, that's cry about something. But outside of that, I don't think that outside of calling it the NBA Cup, like the IST, it just sounds like an error message. It doesn't sound right. And so just call it the NBA Cup and that's about it. But outside of that, I would go with points allowed, or at least try to affect or change what the tiebreak is so that it doesn't, create for that situation that we had this year.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the Heat here. Tyler Hero is going to return sometime soon.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on the whole, when Tyler comes back, are they the same type of offensive team? Are you on the side of, he hurts them offensively a little bit? How do you feel about all that?
I certainly don't think he hurts them. I think he gives them a lot more freedom to do things. I think he makes things easier. I think when he's not out there, and I think this is part of the problem, right? When he's not out there, it feels kind of very much like a playoff scenario where you have to execute well, you have to do everything, rely on Jimmy a lot, and that's how we're going to win. Yeah. When Tyler's out there, it's more, hey, if he's on, he could get us a triple-double. We could win by 20, if he's not. And so it's a little bit more casual. And I think people attach that to Tyler because of his game and the shots. No, like Tyler, you look at those numbers and just ignore how he gets the shots. You look at those numbers. Those are great numbers. Those are all-star, all NBA second team type of numbers. And so I don't think defensively he is that much of an issue. I mean, heck, even Duncan Robinson has gotten strong defensively. And so like the longer you're in the system, the more committed you are, the better you're going to be. So he's better at that. And so I think what it does, if you do have Tyler back, takes a lot of pressure off Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry can have those, disappear games and you don't even notice it. Takes a lot of pressure just off the scores in general. And so even off somebody like Duncan can have a 3 or 4 game stretch where he's not going to be very good and everybody's going to be yelling at him again. Oh, what happened to your big? Well, maybe if Tyler's there, that's not as noticeable. So what I think this does when you have all these other options, Jaime, Tyler, Jimmy, Bam, an expanded Bam game, it just gives you more versatility come the playoffs. Like you don't have to show that off every single game of the regular season, every single month of the regular season. We're not trying to go out here and get, and I say I'm talking as if I'm a member of the Heat. We're not trying to go out here and get these awards or have our best season. Just show yourself that you can do that on a regular basis so that when we get to the postseason, it's options. I can't be schemed as well by the Boston Celtics because they don't know if I'm starting an offense through Bam, if I'm starting through Tyler, through Kyle, through Jimmy. And so all of that just makes life a lot easier for the team. And whether or not it translates to regular season wins, I think is how everybody judges that. But let's just see, because it could be, if everybody stays healthy for 2-3 months, that by that second and third month, this team is coasting, this absolutely rolling with just playing with all those options. But obviously, when you introduce him back into it, it's not going to look perfect right away.
Israel, I think they're already better than they were last year.
Oh, I agree.
Because for me, this regular season was about, we need to get to the postseason where we have replaced Strus and Vincent. They were big-time postseason players. We need to make sure we have two guys that could step into those roles and guys that you can count on in the postseason. And already you got Duncan Robinson, who was not playing last year in the regular season, and you see what he's doing now. You got Haywood Highsmith, who's turned into a legitimate NBA starter for what he does. You got Josh Richardson, who has been fantastic off the bench, and Jaime Jaquez Jr., who has been fantastic off the bench. To me, this team is already a lot, and it seems pretty clear Bam is a lot better than he was last year. This team to me is clearly better than they were last season.
Real quick before I go, you know anything about Bam's hip? How bad are we talking? Because that would be a real bummer if he has to miss some significant time.
He's already listed out, so we're going on like a week, that
one bums me out. But I think I'm in total agreement with what you said there. I think one name that you didn't mention that I think is the key that kind of unlocks all of this. And it's strange because, a lot of people think it's Jaime. I think it's Caleb. Caleb gives you whatever it is that you don't have on any night. He has that opportunity to give it to you. And you never really know when to expect it because his shots are a bit random, but you feel good about them and then all of a sudden, if he's having a good shooting game, he could be another legitimate triple-double threat for you because he's just handling the ball and moving it all around if other guys are hitting as well. So I think, you've got so many think about just the players that you mentioned. Just think about the top, let's say 6 guys, 7 guys on this team. Tyler, 3-level scorer, obviously defensively leaves a little bit to be desired, but hard to game plan against. 3-level scorer. Bam Adebayo, crazy versatility. Jimmy Butler, crazy versatility. Duncan Robinson now has versatility to his game. Jaime Jaquez Jr., you can't really predict. He's going to be in the post. He's going to be on the outside. He's going to be creating. Caleb Martin, same thing. He's going to be creating. He's going to be standing on the corner waiting to dunk on you if you close out too hard. All of those things just give so much versatility to a team that has Eric Spoelstra thinking, man, this is fun. Like, I have so many options here. And you throw in, veterans like Kyle Lowry and Kevin Love, who are just going to keep that train operating and are smart enough to handle any game plan. It's a hell of a team. Yep. And they already know how to work well together and have that success already, in their minds. So they know that if they just follow the path and see that it's a more talented roster, that they're probably going to do even better. And so, I think I'm with you. It's just fun to watch. It's kind of the closest thing to a team that would have been like an academy, like back over in Europe, where they like bring the people up through ages 12, 13 and just like get to know an organization and their philosophies and just really meld together. It just feels like that's what the Heat have become over the last, decade or so, ever since LeBron left.
Jimmy the other day, and I think it was after the loss to the Pacers in the second game, and he said he's not happy where the team is right now. They're really mediocre, and it's like, dude, you're either lying or you're just like, I like that you said it because I like the attitude, but you're either lying or you're just wrong because you guys are actually playing really well.
So if I could just speak for him a little bit, I think we are playing mediocre based on our potential, because I think he knows what he sees here. And it should be, what are they? What are we, 12-7 now? What are
12-9.
12-9. Should be more of a, 15-6 type of team. Should have closed out those other games.
Well, that's what happens when you start 1-4 and you don't play the preseason, Jimmy. That's what happens.
Right. And so Jimmy he's always going to give you the sort of the contrary view. Like, hey, you guys think we're great. We might be, but I see holes, and I'm not going to let this team sort of feel itself a little bit. We're going to do the hard work, because last year it seemed like they let go of the rope late in the regular season, almost missed the postseason entirely. And so it's one of those things where it doesn't matter how good you feel about it, unless you're running away the top of the conference. Jimmy's going to keep you in your place. And I do think that's true. I do think, when they haven't had everybody on the same page for 2 or 3 games in a row, it's been a little bit of like maybe a child's roller coaster of a season so far. So I think he is probably just doing that based on expectations, not so much cracking the whip and saying we suck right now.
Israel, are you excited about the Dolphins right now? Are they going to finish first in the AFC?
That part I hope is true, but I think I've been thinking about this for a while since back when me and Joy did the show, and I talked about how the Dolphins sort of suck the fandom out of me for like 15 years of just mediocrity or terrible play, and it's been a slow sort of progression back.
Yeah,
and I think Brian Flores had me for a second. And then realize, oh no, he's just doing that old school football coach thing. I don't love that. And now it's not just that they're winning, man, but like Tyreek Hill is the best receiver in the league, most fun player to watch in the league. And he's on my team. Like, that's great. Like, I used to watch Randy Moss, just so jealous, watch these receivers just like, man, we could get one of those. And then the thing that makes it even better, and I didn't think this could be true, was Hard Knocks. Hard Knocks has made it so much better because you see, and I don't know, how edited this is, but you see how unified,
like
how
it's not
cool that locker room is, and how they're just like really in it for each other. And I'm not saying that's what's going to elevate them to a Super Bowl, but win or lose at any point in the season, I feel good about how they're going to feel. You know what I mean? Like they're going to be, all right, cool. We did this together. We lost, but I love you guys, And they're going to feel great about going forward, next year and building on that. If they win it all, amazing. Like imagine the vibes that are going to be in this locker room, in this organization for as long as Mike McDaniels is there, right? Because that will have happened so quickly. And we watched it all sort of just watched it all happen in front of us with the second half of the season and Hard Knocks. So all of that makes it so cool. And yeah, it's just like it kind of feels like, with the big three where you just kind of want to like keep it right here and, keep it to ourselves and nobody else can have any of this fun. But yeah, it's really cool to watch. And even somebody like, I think about a guy like Jalen Waddle, who should be a number 1 receiver somewhere, who's really, really good. Such a nice guy, seems like a great teammate, fights through things, and is sort of the opposite of the diva wide receiver. And it's just like a perfect complement to Tyreek Hill. And so, yeah, just so much fun and so cool to see sort of the transformation of like Tua from the last regime to this regime.
You mentioned Brian Flores and how you didn't necessarily love, the type of coach he ended up being. He's been getting a lot of shit on social media the last, couple days, really 24 hours since the Austin Jackson contract extension came out because, and look, Tua fanned the flames a little bit yesterday too, without mentioning Brian Flores, but talking about how, because he's in the same boat where, you get broken down by one coaching staff and then another coaching staff comes in and builds you back up with positivity. So Tua knows exactly what Austin Jackson went through. I mean, look, both of those players, same draft, both first-round picks, people were labeling both of them big-time busts. Yep. And now you look at them now, each of them in their 4th year and their 2nd year under a new coaching regime. And one of them's a franchise quarterback, and the other one is a foundational piece of the offensive line. And man, that's a bad look for Brian Flores.
Well, to me, I think what this comes down to, or at least what comes to mind when I hear these stories, is what people's definition of toughness is and how you gain that or how you have that. And to me, toughness doesn't mean that you're barking and that you can still be tough and still, understand what it means to be a nice person. You could still be a good teammate. You could still say positive, you don't have to be a crazed, maniacal, angry person to be tough. You can still be a nice guy and be tough. And I think that's where, it sort of shows you different styles of leadership, different styles of coaching. But I think regardless of what style, the main sort of quality of a good coach is knowing what that person across from you needs. And I'm not saying that Mike McDaniel has that, fire, sort of Dan Campbell in him if the other guy on the other side needs that. But maybe one of his defensive coaches will do that, or maybe one of the other assistant coaches will do that. But the point is that I, as the head coach, know what that person needs, or at least I think I have a pretty good idea of what that person needs to bring the best out of him. And he's just better at that than the last coach. And on top of that happens to be an offensive kind of mastermind.
Israel, excellent job. Is there anything we
bud.
could promote for you? When are we going to see you on Around the Horn? When can we hear from you again?
Let's see. Let's open this email together, Zaz.
Yes.
Next week on Around the Horn, I just got ATH schedule. Okay, so Tuesday,
Okay.
I will be on with Bill Plaschke.
Okay.
And Bill Barnwell and Marcel Louis Jacques, who
all right. Yeah, that's an easy draw. You'll be all right.
And then again on Thursday, probably an easier draw with Clinton Yates, Woody Page, and Justin Tinsley.
Oh, easy draws for you this week.
2-0 week for me. 2-0
week
for me next week.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Good for you.
Guaranteeing 2-0.
Thanks, Israel. Appreciate you, man.
You got it, Zaz.